All right, it's time for our latest episode of Boardroom RevOps, where we're bringing you valuable tips from RevOps experts so you can make it to the C-suite. I'm James, co-founder of Accounting, the RevOps BI platform. Really excited to welcome David Quartemont today. He's the founder and CEO at RevSearch. David, great to have you, man.
Yeah, James, I'm excited to be here, man. Long overdue. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, David will share his background here, but he leads a RevOps-focused search firm, and we're going to get into a really interesting topic today that is actually kind of near and dear to my heart, and that's just like the role of EQ and emotional intelligence in work broadly, but also RevOps specifically. So we're going to dive in there today. It's going to be really interesting. But first, David, why don't you give us kind of the background?
Sure. Yeah. So without getting too worded on my intro, I have a tendency to do that. I'll try to keep it really concise here. But yeah, ventured out in 2020 to start this firm called RevSearch. And my background, I come from the exec recruiting side. So, that's where I started my career, boutique search, VP, C-level placement. So that's where I cut my teeth. And, ended up getting the opportunity to work on some high-level searches that were very operationally focused throughout the years. And, big scale organizations, transformational roles, lots of Six Sigma, continuous improvement, kind of cross industry. But, I started to develop this knack for complexity and profile and, just kind of fell in love with that. Company has X issue. We're trying to solve this issue and we need to find the right person with the right combination of skills to drive this transformation through. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of background on myself. I grew up in Germany. Fun fact, I was born and raised in Germany, a dual citizen. And so a lot of my search career has been focused on European companies as well. But most recently with RevSearch, it's been mainly North America focused. So we really, fun story, a buddy of mine who was a RevOps leader at a telco company, me and him actually talked while I was kind of going through transition of figuring out what is going to be my niche and stepping out and building this firm. And he was a RevOps person, and we had quite a few chats about my background, some of the placements I had made, and he went, "What do you know about revenue operations? There's something happening. There's a shift happening, and it's a really complex role. There's an evolution happening. We're moving from siloed to end-to-end holistic, revenue organizations. And what are your thoughts on this? And I started unpacking the skill set with him, and I started realizing, wow, this is it. This is the role. This is one of the most high value, most critical strategic assets in a business. And I realized that quickly. And, there's other parts to the story that I won't go into around, the founder piece and the survival piece of having going off on my own and trying to make something happen. But long story short, fell in love with the role and sourcing this role. And I realized this is going to be it. This is going to be the specialty. And we just happened to fall into the private equity space because of my network. And so that's where we kind of niched down again and found really good fit, which is some of the topics we'll go into here around private equity and portfolio company and that relationship and how RevOps really is the unlock in maximizing value. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. We're
That's great.
obsessed with RevOps here. We love the role and we believe in it. So
Yeah, you've clearly made the pitch on pro RevOps before. I think you articulated it as well as anyone I've heard. So I think listeners will love it for sure. Well, that's great, David. Let's dive right in. We'll definitely cover the private equity piece as well. We've had past guests on the show where we talk about it too, and it really seems like they're starting to wake up to the value of RevOps, which is really great to see because they're some of the smartest folks in the room, as they say. So we'll get to that, but let's kick off with just the emotional intelligence piece. Like maybe run me through the highest level, like A, what is emotional intelligence, and B, what does it mean in kind of the context of a RevOps hire?
Yeah. So I think if you look at emotional intelligence, and I'm not an expert. I've not written a book on it, right? But there are kind of four domains. There's self-awareness, self-regulation, relationship management, social awareness. So, what does that look like in terms of work? Obviously, there's the home front where that comes out as well. But within work, that is how we navigate relationships. That is, emotional intelligence is is the key to adoption in revenue operations. When I think of EQ, it can be kind of abstract of like, what is EQ? And I've talked to a lot of people, but once you start unpacking it, you go, wait a minute, if the RevOps leader doesn't have high EQ, none of this other stuff is going to get done, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really this internal battle of self, which now we're getting kind of philosophical in a way. And again, I'm going to steer away from that because I'm not the expert on that. But it's really a battle of self and how we show up at work, how we operate in high stress situations, how we interact with leadership, how we navigate relationships. Right? Are we easily offendable? What is our threshold? Are you aware of your emotional responses at work? Are you burning bridges constantly because of the way you react as opposed to hit the pause button and respond in a healthy, calculated way? So, there are diagrams of the brain that show kind of the different parts of the different centers, where all of this takes place in the brain. And you've got kind of your instinct, which is, your lizard portion of the brain, and you've got your emotional center, your limbic, and then you've got your prefrontal cortex. And so a lot of us, including myself at times, we get stuck in the emotional part of the brain, right? So we're stuck in this emotional part. So we're spiraling, we're dysregulated, and you're trying to figure out, like, what is happening? I'm under attack, right? It's this fight or flight moment. And really good leaders can get to the logic quickly. They can get to the front of the brain through different exercises, through internal kind of calibration, right? They can get to that frontal part of the brain to respond in a healthy way, to have that crucial conversation, to navigate that relationship, to get to a win-win as opposed to blowing everything up, right, with the wrong response. So I think that in a sense, that gives you a good picture, and hopefully the listeners, of how I view it, because it's a human thing. It's a human thing, but people that operate at a high level, they tend to have high EQ. Because they're influencing, they're leading, and in order to achieve, again, in RevOps, the word adoption is so critical, because without adoption, we have nothing. We can have the greatest tools, the greatest tech stack, the greatest processes, great data, great analysis, but if you can't actually move an organization towards adoption, if you can't get people on board, it's not gonna work.
I think that's so right, and then RevOps is such a central role, touching every part of the organization. There's so much coordination to be done that I think a huge gap I see for folks at the associate or manager level is just like, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do my technical job well, and then I should get promoted. But if you're not actually going out and like actually affecting change, to your point, you maybe won't get promoted. In fact, you likely won't, and I think some people don't really realize that. I'm curious, like, you have these conversations all day long. Can you share an example from some of your searches where like a candidate's EQ like kind of really stood out to you, or where it held someone back? Curious to hear this in kind of like practice.
Yeah, all the time, man. This is the more I'm doing this, the longer we're doing this, the more I'm seeing this. We call it the secret sauce. This soft skill set of the role being so important. You need to have the data chops. You need to understand the system. You need to have depth within the different domains, from lead to cash, lead to renewal, kind of cross-functionally. You need to understand what the system needs to look like. But the soft skill set of actually, like you said, initiating change, driving impact, that's a whole nother level. So I would say, the majority of folks that come to us that either want to do a confidential replacement or a backfill of some sort, we talk about EQ. We talk about, we need somebody who can drive. We do not want to we do not want to give somebody orders. We need somebody who can affect change. We need a force multiplier. We need somebody who can come in, diagnose, hand us the doctor's diagnosis of what our company looks like, and help us understand what's working, what's not working, and then help us execute, right? Navigate, again, leading without authority. How do you do that? That's one of the hardest things. That's why this role is so difficult, is because you're not the CEO, but you have to think like the CEO, right? And so I would say, from within our process, I've had candidates that didn't make it forward numerous times because I'm not hearing the signals on that greater perspective, that the capacity to move to that influencer level. I'm not seeing it, right? I mean, we have a vetting process, and we do a lot around impact. Like, that's mainly what we do. It's all about numbers. It's, can you quantify your impact as an operator? So that's what we look at. So when I'm in conversations with candidates, I've done this so long now that I can quickly size somebody up based on the answers, based on digging into a case study with that candidate and understanding, wow, there's not a depth here to justify, to show me that they have the ability to get it done for my client, right? And so, again, there's different ways to look at it, right? There are different parts of RevOps where that skill set comes up, but I think the main thing is what I look for impact, and I look for candidates that, they are initiating, they're driving, they are proactive. And so to answer your question, I was just thinking through some of the interviews recently. Actually, a recent placement is a good example. We came into a process, PE-backed company, and they had a VP, they had a senior level person that was a sales enablement leader, that was a good people leader, but they didn't have this end-to-end skill set. They didn't have the insights the ability to actually, tell the story, quite frankly, to leadership, which is a huge piece. So it was an interesting one because it wasn't like hey, we're hiring our first leader, this person's going to run the show, we're going to build it out. It was a bigger team with a leader, and they were lacking this core piece of revenue operations in the team for the CRO to start to do more high-level stuff. So that was the whole goal, was get the CRO out of the weeds. He's trying to manipulate data, and he's trying to get a read on what's going on. We need somebody in the trenches that can go end to end and make sense of this and create one view and communicate insights and communicate trends and help us put a plan together. And so we started with a very narrow remit, and we put somebody in there that has already, within a few months, expanded their role in a way that somebody with low EQ would not have been able to do, right? With the soft skills of getting to know, building that trust really quickly. That's another piece of this. It's building trust with stakeholders, right? So that you are becoming the trusted resource in the organization. That's the goal. And if you're not that, then you're just an order taker in the back office, and that's how people see you, right? I'm going to pause there for a moment. I've been going on for a while.
No, it's great stuff. There's two things I wanted to follow up on. I'll do them in reverse order. You mentioned like building that trust and expanding the role, and I think so many RevOps people say, okay, great, I need to build trust. I want to do that, but just like don't know how. So I'm curious, like if you've seen a trend from some of your successful candidates, maybe folks that have made VP or whichever level, of like the tactics they use to do that, or how they talk about doing it. Like maybe in some of these like case studies they talk about like how they've actually done that influence. I'm curious if there's like a second level that folks are doing that anyone listening can kind of take away as advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the keyword is ROI. It's opportunity, it's white space, it's those are some of the keywords that I would say differentiate somebody. If you're coming in, the way you build trust is you show value. How do you show value? You get to know the people that you're supporting, and you understand what matters most to them. You understand
it's like a sales process. Yeah, we talk about this sometimes.
Absolutely.
You got to do discovery on your stakeholders and deliver for them. Yeah,
100%. So if you're coming in and you're going, I've got the solution. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'll build a world-class revenue engine, and you guys are going to go to the moon. It's like, nope, no, hard stop, right? That's not the solution. The solution is you are an expert that is coming in to diagnose, understand the people that you're serving, understand the different personalities that you're dealing with, understand the fiefdoms, the shortcomings, do a deep dive, build trust with people in a relationship manner, like building relationships around their goals, understanding what is the overarching goal of this company, and in PE, what is the thesis, right, for this business? What are we trying to achieve? Where are we trying to go? So I think it's understanding that and getting to the heart of the matter quickly. I think you can. I've heard quite a few stories of folks coming into this role and losing trust pretty quickly because they think they have the solution. They think they have it figured out. And really, it's a collaborative effort. It's bringing your own playbook for sure. You have best practices that this company needs, but depending on the culture and the business, that changes. So you have to be able to adapt to a different culture, to a different business model, and then come up with a win-win for that particular business. So that requires a consultative approach, and that's how I would label it. So I think that's the differentiator. It's, are you able to surface game-changing insights? Are you able to find the opportunities? Are you able to size the business up fairly quickly and communicate it in a way that doesn't make you the bull in a china shop?
Yeah. That's really well put, and shameless plug for accounting too. That's what we talk about though, in terms of getting the data foundation in place to actually be able to provide those insights in real time and provide that value. You also said something that really resonated to me that I wanted to kind of underline as well, and that was understanding what the business is trying to get done and what your senior stakeholders are trying to get done. I think I hear more often the negative cases where things go wrong for RevOps folks, and we chat in the market and folks are frustrated, and many folks will understandably so complain about how there's just so much to do, it's chaotic, they become an order taker, they can have that strategic insight. But I think in many cases those folks maybe aren't doing as good of a job of actually understanding what really matters and laser focusing in on that and delivering it for the rest of the company. I think it's really easy to get distracted, but you're actually doing yourself a disservice in your career by trying to do everything, including many of the maybe priority C and D items, not the priority A items. And so I think like the EQ, coming back to it, is understanding what actually matters, having those conversations with people to figure that out.
100%. Everybody has good ideas. But I think that the role of RevOps, if I were to, first of all, RevOps must be unoffendable. The RevOps leader must be unoffendable. Like, I'm going to just pause there for a second. That's huge. That's EQ. I heard one of my private equity contacts. I was in a meeting with him one time. We were kicking off a role, and he said, David, really the main reason why I'm bringing in RevOps is to take the emotions out of the boardroom. That's why I'm hiring RevOps. Let's cut the BS. Let's get to the heart of the matter, right? And let's get the ship rowing in the right direction. That's ultimately what RevOps is supposed to do. Support in a business. So, yeah. So I think
great. That should be
then,
so flattering for RevOps folks too. That's why people are bringing RevOps folks in. That's incredibly impactful. Taking emotion out of the boardroom.
And it's easier said than done, right? I'm gonna also say, it's an organism, right? A business is full of different personalities, and sometimes you have growth-minded people, sometimes you have fixed-minded people in that business, right? What would be great is if you had only growth-minded people, and I've actually heard of companies like that. I've worked with a couple where you drop RevOps in, and it's like putting gasoline on a fire, and it's unreal, right? The impact. But oftentimes it's a mixed bag of certain people that have been there. There's some politics, there's some fixed mindset, there's, I've been doing this way, right? I don't want to challenge the status quo. I don't need you. And so RevOps is up against, there's like a battle that RevOps is fighting. But again, great RevOps leaders are going to be able to come in there and convert that person, that fixed-minded person. Sometimes maybe it's impossible, right? There are people that are so off the beaten path that are hard to convince, right? Hard to turn around. But I think generally, when you get to why does this matter for me? How does this change that is this new thing, this new process, this new tool, this new strategy that is going to move me away from my comfort zone, how is that going to impact me? How is that going to make my life better, right? That's the connection that the RevOps leader has to make while thinking about the overall business objective. Because it is about the business. It's not about fiefdoms. It's not about people. And if we run a business that is full of people that think it's their domain, like their function matters more than what the business is about, that's a failing scenario. It has to be about the business. So, but I think at an individual level, it has to be that connection of what's in it for me?
Yeah, definitely.
And
These are great, really great reflections here. I want to chat. We're kind of coming up on time soon-ish. I want to chat on your perspectives of EQ and kind of PE-backed company. But real quick first, as we kind of round out the first conversation here, like, based on what you've seen, the conversations you've had, maybe understanding the background of really successful RevOps folks that you've placed, like, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe strong technically but needs to build that leadership presence to move into an executive role? Like, how can folks actually flex this muscle?
Well, get into the Account Aim mentorship program.
Yeah, RevOps Connect, another shameless plug. You're just teeing me up, man. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Here you go. Layup. I think it's a multifaceted approach. So, on an individual level, sit back and go inward. Like, understand who you are as a person. Understand what triggers you. What's your story of origin that informs your emotional spirals? If you are someone who's not quite there yet, with that self-control, that self-assessment, and then to be able to respond in a healthy way, do some self-reflection. I think that goes a long way. And the easiest thing to do is ask your spouse, significant other, or whoever in your life, what do they see? What kind of person do they see? And that's really insightful, actually, when you ask.
It's a scary thing to ask, though.
Feedback. It's a very scary thing to ask, but I think people that want to have high emotional intelligence they're willing to go there. They're going to receive feedback. That's another thing. They're unoffendable. They're going to humble themselves and go, okay, I'll listen. Because there's probably something there to learn, right? Which is another like innate thing that RevOps leaders bring, is this desire to improve and get better and iterate.
Yes.
And so that should also be about self. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is mentorship. So getting into, I've connected folks with senior leaders in my pipeline. You guys have a more formalized community, which is awesome. So I think having somebody look at what you're doing and going and asking them questions. What was your journey like? How did you get there? What kind of questions did you ask? What did you prioritize? How do you operate at this level? Because a lot of it goes into higher level strategy work, corporate strategy and planning. And so I think having VP mentoring like what you guys are doing is fantastic. The other thing I would say is make friends with C-level leaders. Mm-hmm. Right? Get to know the priorities of the people you're trying to serve. And specifically, if you want to be a PE-backed RevOps leader, find folks that have worked in PE-backed companies and have scaled and exited, right? Finding people and building those relationships. Now, those folks are busy, but I think, I've met a lot of folks at that level, CROs, CFOs that want to give back. They're happy to hop on a quick call. So I think understanding your stakeholders better is going to make you is going to set you up better to move into this higher level EQ skill set, because you know what the real needs are of that individual, and that's what it's really all about, is not wasting time and getting to the heart of the matter. So there are also books, Crucial Conversations. I'm in that one right now. That's a great one, right? Having hard conversations without burning bridges, getting to a win-win, putting your emotions to the sideline and getting to actual solutions. So that's been a great book. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is another one. They actually do an online assessment, so you can kind of self-assess and test. So yeah. And then the other piece is take initiative. If you're an IC or if you're a number 2, take initiative. Push the envelope a little bit, right? Take some risks. Find some insights that nobody else knows about, if there are some, right? And surface those up and see what happens. Get out of your comfort zone. I think it's all of this is coming back to challenging self and moving outside the comfort zone and those are the stories of great RevOps leaders. They were in a role where they started going, there's more opportunity here, and I'm going to start doing some stuff. And before you know it, you pull a C-level leader aside, you give them a couple of game changers, and they go, oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. We should double down on that. And that's how you start to, those are the building blocks.
100%. I love it. I think that's really well covered, at least from my experience too. The only other thing I'd add is kind of like a different form of mentorship is just bigger companies. My co-founder Josh and I both started in investment banking, which has a really good kind of apprenticeship model. I think a lot of consultants I've worked with have had really good skill set because I think there's a good apprenticeship model there as well. Not necessarily as formal in RevOps, and that's the challenge of the role, is that it's kind of ill-defined in some cases, but there's got to be some companies out there that do RevOps really well. You ask around, you'll probably hear it, and maybe you can go meet someone there that's like really figured this out and kind of take you under your wing. And so I'd throw that on the radar as well. Maybe not quite as easy, but something I've seen work. I want to get to the PE-backed part of this. You spend a lot of time placing folks into PE-backed companies. A little bit different of an environment in many cases. Like, how do they differ in terms of expectations, jobs to be done, pressure, maybe? Yeah, feel free to wax poetic on it.
Man, so I'm gonna quote my good friend and my good friend Matt Gallagher, who we work a lot with over at HG Capital. We did a case study together on a placement recently, and he in the video he said, "We have 20 months to get this thing right." I mean, sorry, I misquoted. We have 20 quarters to get it right. Okay, so 5-year hold period on average, sometimes longer. What does that create? That creates a very small window of unlocking up value for a company, like true value, right? So, most PE companies, they have a 100-day plan. They come into a new company, 100-day plan to get things going, right? The time to value is so narrow, so small. That's why CRO's average tenure is 12, 13 months, 24 months, something like that. Don't quote me on that. But again, it's the 20 quarters, it's the 5-year hold period, and PE is looking at that and going, we want to 3x, the value of this company essentially, and we want to do it as fast as possible. We want to get the biggest return, biggest bang on the buck, right? And so, what does that create? That creates a small window, a very fast-paced environment, a very hands-on environment, PE being involved, PE meaning, so not standing off. There are some private equity firms that are more hands-off. They're less push, more pull in their approach with the portco. But I think the ones that I've worked with that really value this role and prioritize the role, they know they need somebody there for them to get the scorecard. That's fast as humanly possible. They need to get a tight ship. They need to have reads on performance, on growth rate, on really the most important things now in the post growth at all cost. It's growth and profitability. It's EBITDA margin, right? That's the main thing. It's like, we're not just growing. Okay, great, we're bringing in new logos, but are we actually efficiently growing? Are we truly creating value, right? So you have to look at both of those. So you have to understand what are the most important things that private equity folks are looking for. What kind of metrics matter most, right? And then layering it down to the organization level. And so, things like rule of 40, magic number, LTV to CAC ratios, those are the game-changing metrics that show viability of a great growing business. And RevOps has to absolutely care about those. The revenue operations has to know how to influence and move the needle on those most important metrics. Now, obviously, layer down from that, it gets more granular across the customer life cycle. But I think you still have to keep in mind, what does private equity care about? How do we influence these metrics in this business, right? So often I talk to leaders, and they come in and you're looking at, okay, we're selling well, we're bringing in tons of new logos, but yet there's an imbalance in the business. Like, we're losing. What's going on? And you start to dig, and they're bleeding a bunch of logos on the other side. That we're not actually keeping customers. So, it really has to be a holistic approach to revenue, and with those metrics in mind.
I'm totally with you, and we see it as well for PE-backed companies. Like, I think it's such an interesting role for RevOps folks because it forces you to understand the customer journey, how it actually impacts the business, and what are the levers for every important part of the customer journey as it relates to the bottom line. And I think sometimes I love all the tools, I love AI, I love a good system, but I think sometimes folks get a little bit mired in kind of the workflows and stuff, which are important and can have great business impact. But it's really like, how do we deliver an effective customer journey that makes this a really successful business? And I love the laser focus from PE firms on that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think I mentioned on the call before when we prepped for this, technology is easy, it's linear. People are really hard. They're non-linear. And that's why EQ is so essential in this role. Because you're not just, well, maybe we'll get there. We'll have a bunch of AI agents running businesses at some point. So who knows, man? Fast forward 5 to 10 years, who knows what will be. But, right now we're dealing with humans, and humans do what humans want to do. They have feelings, they have emotions, right? And so you have to figure out how to herd the village and get the village moving. So that's why this is so essential for this role. EQ is so important.
Yeah, I'll cap this off by just kind of combining the two topics. So tell me, I think we kind of have alluded to it, maybe indirectly, like with how you described the RevOps role and the overall objective for a PE-backed company. How does that change the type of people you hire? This can be EQ related, not EQ related, more about like competencies, kind of like what are you looking for that's maybe slightly different than the average RevOps person? Or what are they looking for at the board?
Yeah, they're looking for people that have that soft skill set. They're looking for people that have command, they have drive, because if you don't have influence, you're not gonna get it done. The order, the private equity order is so tall that you have to be someone who can thrive in adversity, in adapt to change super fast, right? That's a key. You have to try things, you have to fail, you have to change, you have to make change. You can't sit back and test something for forever. You have to really you have to match that pace. So what I look for is I look for people that have thrived in that sort of environment. Oftentimes I look for folks that have been there, done that, right? Most of our clients want to have somebody who's had a case study in a PE-backed environment. So, but I do think there are plays where we've had candidates that don't necessarily check all the boxes, but they bring that initiative, they bring that drive, and they're able to demonstrate that throughout the interview process that, no, I've unlocked opportunity, and here's how I've done it, right? I've presented up to leadership, and I've been able to drive those conversations. I've been able to thrive in very uncomfortable environments in the boardroom, and here's how I've done that. Here's how I've accomplished this change. Here's how it impacted those top metrics that we're talking about in private equity. So I think part of it's communicating impact, and then the other part is, are you able to run at a really fast pace and get to the heart of the matter quickly, right? Let's not waste any time here. Let's not sit back and think this little thing here in a siloed mindset is gonna be the game changer for this company. No, we need to diagnose. So I look at people that really diagnose end to end. I think that's one of the most important things in this, and understand business really quickly. That's the other piece. It's understanding the business. If you can understand and size up a business quickly, you will be able to have those conversations, and you'll come across as someone who has acumen. They throw out the terms gravitas, business acumen. All of that's rooted in your ability to come into a business, understand the business really fast, and put together a plan and identify the leaks, identify the gaps, find the root causes, right? Analyzing really quickly and being able to say, hey, here are the 3 to 5 things I've identified that are going to move this business forward. Let's talk about it. Let's align on it. Do we want to put a plan together around this? Those kinds of folks tend to thrive in PE-backed companies.
That's great. That's a good place to leave it, David. Thank you so much for joining. This is awesome. I think it's one of my favorite episodes in a while. Anyone listening, if you're kind of looking for a new gig, David Quartemont, RevSearch, he's your guy. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir. Take care.